work well. Then, if you want to go ahead in there our pompano around, you can take and use your 10-foot rod and cast to the inside of the outer bar. With that 10-foot rod, you can get the distance to do that. So that way, if you have two sand spikes, you can fish two things, you do two things at once. The pyramid type of sinker that I showed you before digs down in the sand. This sinker here is a drift sinker, and that just drags along the bottom. Usually you don't even need an ounce. I generally use 3/4 of an ounce. You're going to have a strip of bait hanging down here, and you're going to have a strip of bait here. And what you want to do, you don't want to go wading in the water. You don't have to do that. Stand right on the beach and take this rod, your freshwater rod, or this is just one of my, this is a Bendor rod also. It's designed for this. And you just take and put that about halfway between the slough or the bar and the beach. When you're working that, when you're fishing for that flounder, what you do, you throw that halfway between that outer bar and the beach, and you just pull it along that bottom real slow. Just pull it real slow. Just drag it along the bottom and kind of stop with it. As you stop with it, you might want to wiggle around a little. Just take that rod, the tip of that rod, and wiggle a little bit. Pull it to you real slow. Stop a little and wiggle around a little. When you're doing that wiggling, that strips of bait are flipping around like a minnow. And if you feel something pull on it, first what you'll do, you'll feel a peck, peck, peck type of thing, and then you'll feel a tug on it, a pull. It'll start to go away from you. It's a drag on it. Then you want to raise the tip of that rod and set that hook. Just take that tip of that rod and set it, push it up tight, and then bring that fish on in and do the same thing. Always remember, do not work against the wave, and let that flounder, and he'll flip right up on the beach. Another thing, if you're right there and nothing seems to be happening, and you get almost to the beach, don't stop and bring that line in. Literally drag that line all the way out of the water up over the edge. A lot of these flounder lay right on that edge. They're right on the drop-off, and they're going to grab it right there. You see a lot of people, they're standing in water up to their knees, and they're flounder fishing. Well, hell, the flounder are behind them. The flounder are between them and the beach. So you want to keep up out of the water, drag that line right up off out of the water onto the beach, then recast again. And again, is when you're bringing this thing, as I said, you're bringing it along, you're moving it real slow. If you feel something, you don't feel this tapping motion, but you just feel a sudden drag and it's a pull on it. As you raise the rod, it pulls still, you still have resistance, and the resistance stays there, and you don't feel any tapping or any movement. 8 out of 10 times what you got a crab hanging on the end of that bait. So all you want to do then is shake that rod real hard and knock that crab off, or go ahead and reel it in and throw it out. And you can look at the bait and you'll tell whether the crab is the thing that's been bothering you. One thing that you want to look for when you're buying this bait, now, and you get this mullet, you want to make sure that bait has good clear eyes. You can look at the eyes. If they have a milky glaze over them, that's not what you want. You want to get a fish that has real good clean eyes. Always keep your bait cool and dry. It needs to be kept dry. You don't want to let any water get on it, because it'll make it soft. When you're buying bloodworms, you want to make sure that they're good, healthy looking worms. Just look in the package, take them out and make sure they're good and firm, and do the same with shrimp. And what I recommend with shrimp, when I use shrimp, I buy shrimp that I'd eat. So I just take extra care of it when I'm using it for bait and not handling it too much, and only taking the pieces out that I'm going to use. And then if I don't catch anything with it, I take it home and eat it. And that way you got good fresh bait. Fresh bait is the key to catching fish. With mullet, what I do with the mullet is the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the stomach out of this mullet. I'm just going to take the knife and go right down and cut this belly out. We do two things when we cut the belly out. We get the entrails out. It'll preserve the fish a lot longer. It won't go bad as quick. This belly, I'm going to show you in a minute what we're going to do with this. We're going to use this for flounder bait. Now, when we're going to use mullet, what we do is always scale the fish, but I only cut off enough meat that I'm going to use. I don't cut it in a lot of little chunks and set it up on the cooler or set it around anywhere around where I'm fishing. I always keep it cool and keep it dry, and I cut off what I need. What I'll do is I cut from the back down toward the belly and just cut a small piece out. And I'll merely take that piece of bait and just hook it through the meat first, and then through the skin. That's an important thing. Hold the skin on your fingers and push it through the meat. This mullet is really good. It's good and fresh. You don't have any problems with that meat getting mashed. Now, if you turn it the other way and you're pushing that hook down through that skin, the pressure that it takes the hook to break the skin will make that mullet mushy, and it'll flatten it out and squeeze it. Whereas if you're holding the skin, it doesn't do that. So you've got the mullet there, and what I like to do is when I'm potluck fishing, as I'll keep referring to it as that's when you're fishing for anything that comes along. I'll have a piece of mullet on the bottom, or I'll put a bloodworm or a piece of shrimp on the top. And pretty much what you're going to catch with that is pigfish, croakers, and just about anything that swims along. Then take this belly that I saved, take the scales off of it, cut it into strips just like a pork rind strip. The only change that we're going to make in this whole setup is with the mullet and the bloodworms, we normally would use a 2 or 3 ounce pyramid sinker. That's the bottom fishing sinker, because now we're not bottom fishing, remember, we're going into the flounder fishing. But what I'm doing is I'm showing you the way to put these strips on. Now, we don't need this mullet anymore. We're not using that chunk. That's for bottom fishing. And then for the flounder fishing, we're just taking a piece of that belly that I stripped out. You're hooking it through one time. The same thing. Keep the skin against your fingers, the meat outward, and put that through. Take your other on your top hook. You do the same thing. There again, keep that skin against your fingers and have the meat facing out. Anytime you put bait on, try to remember that. That keeps from mashing the bait if the bait gets a little bit old, especially after a day or so. You push that through, and that's what you've got. You just have these strips. They come through that water, that white, and it flashes, and that flounder, he'll suck right up on that. But that's exactly the way the rig looks. Now, you can go out and you can buy flounder rigs with floats and all different things, but this thing works really well for me. First, you take your hands and you spread the fingers like I have here. You just put that between the foot of the reel, in between the foot of the reel, those fingers. By me being right-handed, I'm going to rotate that reel to my index finger. I'm going to put my index finger out. I'm going to catch that line with my index finger and pull it toward me. It's important that you hold that line toward you. If you keep it up in front of that reel, it's going to fluff off. So you pick it up with the index finger, you pull the line toward you. Off the end of your rod, you want to leave about 2 foot hanging from the end of your rod. And after I do this casting, we can go back and I'll show you that. You've got 1.5 to 2 foot hanging off the end of the rod. You have it on your index finger, you open the bail, you bring your rod back, keeping your forearm straight and your wrist straight. This is important, the wrist being straight. Left hand to the butt of the rod, and you want to put it wherever it feels good to you. If this butt is a little bit too long, then of course move up. Get it where it's comfortable. Being right-handed, you put your left foot forward, and what you want to do is direct your eyes to where you want this to land. You want to try to throw it as far as you can, but you want to put that to where you want it to land. That's where you want your eyes. And what you're going to do, you're going to let the rod do the work. Remember, the rod does the work. The reel doesn't crank it in, and your whole body is not going to help you. Let the rod do the work. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull down hard with your left hand, and you're going to snap your right wrist. As you do in that type of motion, and as that rod comes about to where your eye, it catches the tip of your eye, that's when you want to let it go. That's when you want to release the line off the index finger. That is the problem, is getting coordinated to where you let the line go at the right place. So once you've got the line in the water, what I do is rather than take a handle and slam a bail shut, that's awful hard on bail springs and reels. I've developed a habit where I merely reach over with my left hand and I shut the bail manually. When you're casting, you throw it out and you're waiting for it to hit the water and you're watching, you automatically just bring your hand over and let it stay by the bail. When it hits the water and sinks, shut it manually. You've already got your drag set to where fish won't break it when you're bringing it in. But when you put this thing in a sand spike and you're going to walk away from it, you want to loosen that drag so that it's loose enough that it won't pull that rod out of the sand spike. If you have that too tight and that rod's going to do that, what's going to happen, if a big fish comes along, he's going to break the line or he's going to break your rod or pull it out of the sand spike. So what you want to do, you reach down, you know where your preset drag is, and normally what I'll do is take one more full turn.